Elvis pushed the door open with a heavy sigh, setting his keys on the small table by the entrance. The house was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that felt wrong. He paused, listening for the familiar sounds of his children playing or the clatter of dishes in the kitchen, but there was nothing. It was as if the life had been sucked out of the place. He walked through the hallway, his shoes tapping against the wooden floor. As he turned the corner into the living room, he froze. His wife, Maria, was in the middle of the room, her back to him, furiously shoving clothes into a large suitcase. The sight was so jarring that for a moment, he wondered if he was dreaming. "What the hell is going on?" Elvis asked, his voice sharp with confusion. Maria didn't even flinch. She kept packing, her movements frantic, almost mechanical. "I'm done, Elvis," she said, her voice cold and detached. "I'm sick of living paycheck to paycheck with you. I found someone better, someone with 12 inches, not like your boring little 4 inches. And of course, he's younger and filthy rich, unlike you, dumbass." Elvis felt as if the floor had just dropped out from under him. "Maria, what the fuck are you talking about?" He stepped closer, trying to catch her eye, but she avoided his gaze, focusing instead on folding a dress with deliberate care. "What about the kids, Maria? What about our family?" His voice cracked as he spoke, desperation creeping in. Finally, Maria looked up, her eyes hard and unfeeling. "It's simple, Elvis. You're the father. You keep them. I want to enjoy my life. I'm done playing house with you." Elvis opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say anything, the sound of a powerful engine rumbled from outside. He turned toward the window just in time to see a sleek, black SUV pull into the driveway. The doors swung open, and out stepped a man who looked like he had walked straight out of a magazine. Tall, well-dressed, with a smirk plastered on his face. The man strutted up to the front door, and without knocking, pushed it open and walked in. "Hey, loser," he said, looking Elvis up and down with a sneer. "She belongs to me now. And you keep the kids. We don't want those fucking little monsters." Elvis's heart sank. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the scene unfolding before him. "Maria, are you serious?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before she could answer, there was a sudden patter of small feet, and their 8-year-old daughter, Rose, burst into the room. Her eyes were wide with confusion and fear as she looked from her mother to the stranger standing in their home. "Mommy, what's happening? Where are you going?" she asked, her voice trembling. Maria barely spared her a glance. "I'm leaving, Rose. You're staying here with your daddy." Rose's eyes filled with tears as she ran to her mother, grabbing onto her leg. "Mommy, please don't go," she pleaded, her small hands clinging desperately to Maria's jeans. But Maria pulled her leg away, almost in disgust. "Let go, Rose. I have to go." Just then, Jake, their 15-year-old son, appeared in the doorway. His face was pale, his eyes red from holding back tears. "Mom, please don't do this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We need you. We're a family. You can't just leave us." Maria's expression didn't change. She reached for another blouse to pack. "You'll be fine, Jake. You have your father. I need to think about myself for once." Elvis watched his children crumble before him, their pleas falling on deaf ears. Anger surged through him, hot and blinding, but he fought to keep his voice steady. "Maria, if you leave with this jerk, don't think you can come back when the fantasy fades. You're not welcome here ever again, and the kids will hate you forever." For a brief moment, Maria hesitated, the dress she was holding pausing mid-fold. But then the man behind her cleared his throat, and her resolve hardened. She zipped up the suitcase, closed it with a snap, and turned to face Elvis. "This is your problem now," she said, her tone flat, as though she was discussing the weather. She grabbed the suitcase handle and walked past Elvis without a backward glance, her lover close behind. The door slammed shut, the sound echoing through the now eerily quiet house. Elvis stood there, motionless, his mind numb. It wasn't until Rose's quiet sobs broke the silence that he finally moved. He knelt down, pulling his daughter into his arms. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're going to be okay," he whispered, though the words felt hollow. Jake stood at the doorway, his fists clenched at his sides, his jaw set in a hard line. "Dad, what do we do now?" Jake asked, his voice barely audible. Elvis looked up at his son, the weight of their new reality settling heavily on his shoulders. He wanted to say something that would make it all better, but the truth was, he didn't have an answer. All he could do was hold his daughter close and hope that somehow they would find a way to move forward. The sound of the SUV's engine roared to life outside, and Elvis's chest tightened as he heard the tires crunch against the gravel, carrying Maria and her new lover away from them. He stood up slowly, taking a deep breath, and turned to his children. "We're going to get through this," he said, more to himself than to them. "We have to." Jake nodded, his eyes hard with determination. "We don't need her," he said, though his voice wavered slightly. "We'll be okay, Dad." Elvis forced a smile, ruffling his son's hair. "Yeah, we will. But for now, let's just focus on getting through tonight." He led them into the kitchen, where he mechanically began to prepare dinner. The routine actions helped to steady his nerves, and he tried to focus on the task at hand. But as he looked over at his children, sitting quietly at the table, the weight of what had just happened pressed down on him like a lead blanket. They ate in silence, the sound of clinking silverware the only noise in the house. Elvis couldn't shake the image of Maria walking out the door, couldn't banish the echo of her cold words from his mind. When dinner was over, he sent the kids to bed with a promise that they would talk more in the morning. He sat at the table long after the dishes were cleared, staring blankly at the wall. The house felt emptier than ever, as if Maria had taken more than just her things when she left. Eventually, he rose from the table, his movements slow and deliberate, and made his way to his bedroom. The bed felt too big, the silence too loud. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep, the events of the evening replaying over and over in his mind. Maria's departure were an emotional battlefield. Elvis felt like he was walking through a fog, barely able to grasp the reality that had descended upon him and his children. Every corner of the house was a reminder of the life that had been shattered. Rose's abandoned toys, Jake's forgotten soccer cleats, the half-empty closet in the bedroom. Each of these reminders weighed heavily on Elvis's mind as he tried to figure out how to move forward. Morning after morning, Elvis forced himself to get out of bed, driven by a sense of duty. His children needed him now more than ever, and he couldn't afford to crumble. Still, every day felt like a struggle against a relentless tide of despair. Rose was the first to show signs of the toll Maria's departure had taken. She had always been a sensitive child, but now her sadness ran deeper than ever before. Every night, Elvis would hear her muffled sobs through the thin walls of the house. "Daddy, where's Mommy? Why doesn't she want to be here with us?" she would ask, her voice small and fragile as he tucked her into bed. Elvis's heart broke each time he had to answer. "Mommy's gone for now, sweetie, but I'm here, and I always will be. We'll be okay, I promise." He would stroke her hair, trying to soothe her, but he could see the uncertainty in her eyes. As the days turned into weeks, Rose's once bright smile faded, replaced by a constant look of confusion and sadness. She clung to Elvis more than ever, afraid to let him out of her sight, as if she feared he might disappear too. Jake, on the other hand, reacted with anger. His frustration was like a fire that he couldn't put out, and it consumed him. He started skipping meals, locking himself in his room, and refusing to talk to anyone. When he did come out, it was usually to lash out. He'd slam doors, shout at his sister, or argue with Elvis over the smallest things. "Why the hell did she leave us, Dad? What did we do wrong?" he would shout, his fists clenched tight as if he wanted to hit something, anything, to make the pain go away. Elvis could see the pain behind Jake's anger, the hurt that his son was trying so hard to hide. He tried to talk to Jake, but every conversation ended in a shouting match. "It's not your fault, Jake," Elvis would say, trying to reach his son, but Jake wasn't ready to hear it. "She doesn't care about us, Dad. She left because she didn't give a damn about our family," Jake shouted one evening, his voice hoarse from the emotion. He stormed out of the room before Elvis could say anything more, leaving Elvis standing there, helpless and aching for his son. Elvis realized he had to do something more than just wait for time to heal their wounds. He needed to show Jake and Rose that they could still be a family, even if things would never be the same again. He threw himself into his role as both mother and father with renewed determination. He started getting up earlier, preparing breakfast for them before they left for school, and making sure to be there when they got home. He found himself attending every parent-teacher conference and every school event, even the ones Maria used to take care of. He was there for every soccer game, every school play, and every moment that mattered to his kids. At the same time, the fire of revenge burned steadily in the back of Elvis's mind. He couldn't shake the image of Maria walking out that door, her lover smirking as he took everything from him. The anger was always there, simmering just below the surface, waiting for a chance to explode. But he kept it bottled up, focusing on being there for his kids instead. One day, they'll see what they've done, he would think to himself, his hands gripping the steering wheel as he drove to work. They can't just walk away and expect no consequences. One evening, after another tense dinner where Jake barely spoke, Elvis decided it was time to address the elephant in the room. As they finished eating, Elvis looked across the table at his son, who was poking at the remnants of his meal. "Jake, we need to talk," Elvis said, his voice calm but firm. Jake glanced up, his eyes guarded. "About what?" "About what's going on. I know things have been tough since your mom left, and I know you're angry," Elvis began, choosing his words carefully. "But we're still a family, Jake. We need to stick together." Jake dropped his fork onto his plate with a clatter. "How, Dad? How are we supposed to be a family when she just left us like that? Like we're nothing to her?" Elvis leaned forward, meeting Jake's eyes. "I don't have all the answers, Jake. I wish I did. But I know one thing. We're not nothing. We have each other, and that's something. It's everything." Jake looked away, his jaw tight. "It's not the same, Dad. It never will be." "No, it won't," Elvis agreed, his voice heavy with truth. "But that doesn't mean we give up. We can't control what she did, but we can control how we move forward. We'll get through this, Jake. Together." For the first time in weeks, Jake's tough exterior cracked just a little. He didn't say anything, but the tension in his shoulders eased slightly. Elvis took that as a small victory. After dinner, as Jake retreated to his room and Rose curled up on the couch with her favorite stuffed animal, Elvis sat down in the living room, staring out the window into the darkening night. The pain was still there, raw and relentless, but so was the determination. He had to be strong for his kids, no matter what. But beneath it all, the thought of revenge continued to linger, growing stronger each day. Elvis knew he needed to be careful, to think things through. The last thing he wanted was to do something reckless that would hurt his kids even more. But he couldn't let Maria and her lover get away with what they had done. "They'll pay for this," he thought to himself, his jaw tightening. "I'll make sure of it." In the days that followed, Elvis's resolve only grew stronger. He began to lay the groundwork for what he knew would be a long and meticulous process. He couldn't rush this. He needed to be patient, to wait for the right moment. In the meantime, he would focus on his children, on rebuilding their lives, and on making sure they knew they were loved and cared for. But deep down, Elvis knew that this was only the beginning. The real fight was yet to come, and when it did, he would be ready. He would show Maria and her lover that they had made the biggest mistake of their lives. Months slipped by, the pain of betrayal dulling into a persistent ache that Elvis could never fully shake. His life, once shattered, had slowly begun to piece itself back together. His children were adapting to their new reality, but the scars left by their mother's abandonment were still fresh. Rose had stopped asking about her mother as often, though the sadness in her eyes never fully disappeared. Jake, while no longer as angry, had become more guarded, more cynical. Elvis saw it all and felt a burning sense of injustice. He knew he couldn't just let Maria and Greg walk away from what they had done. They had to face the consequences. Elvis had always been a methodical man. He approached his work, his responsibilities, and now his revenge with the same calculated precision. He started by gathering information. Elvis knew that he couldn't go into this blindly. If he was going to make them pay, he needed to know everything about their new life. So, he hired a private investigator, someone discreet and thorough, to dig into Maria's and Greg's lives. The investigator was a retired cop named Morais, who had a knack for uncovering secrets. "Elvis, you're gonna want to sit down for this," Morais said, handing Elvis a thick envelope filled with reports and photographs. They were sitting in a dimly lit corner of a bar, far from prying eyes. Elvis opened the envelope and began flipping through the contents. The more he read, the tighter his grip became on the papers. Greg was far from the successful entrepreneur he pretended to be. His wealth was a house of cards, built on shaky deals, fraudulent schemes, and connections to unsavory characters. The photos showed Greg at meetings with men who looked more like enforcers than businessmen. There were pictures of him entering and leaving buildings that Elvis recognized from news reports about criminal investigations. "His whole empire is a scam," Morais explained. "He's been skimming money off his own companies, laundering it through shell corporations, and it's only a matter of time before it all comes crashing down. But it gets worse. Your wife? She's neck-deep in it too. She's been spending money like it's going out of style, but it's all dirty. If this goes south, she's going down with him." Elvis felt a grim satisfaction brewing in his chest. Maria had left him and their children for a fantasy, a dream of a life filled with luxury and ease. But that dream was about to become a nightmare. "Thanks, Morais," Elvis said. Standing up, "I'll take it from here." Armed with this information, Elvis began to execute his plan. He knew he couldn't take down Greg directly. He needed to be smart, subtle. The first step was to plant seeds of doubt in Greg's business relationships. Elvis started sending anonymous tips to Greg's clients and investors, pointing out irregularities in his business practices. He did it carefully, making sure the tips came from different sources so they couldn't be traced back to him. It didn't take long for the effects to show. Greg's investors began to pull out one by one. Deals that had been in the pipeline for months suddenly fell through. Rumors spread like wildfire through the business community, and soon Greg's empire started to crumble. Elvis watched it all unfold from a distance, feeling a cold sense of vindication. While Greg's life unraveled, Elvis was quietly rebuilding his own. He threw himself into his work with renewed energy, staying late at the office, taking on new projects, and making connections that would elevate his career. His efforts paid off. He earned a promotion, and with it came a significant raise. But it wasn't just about the money. Elvis wanted to prove to himself and to his children that they could rise above the betrayal. He wanted Maria to see the man she had abandoned, successful, respected, and stronger than ever. As Elvis's professional life flourished, he also began to pay more attention to his personal life. For a long time, he had shut himself off from the idea of love, too hurt and too focused on his kids to consider starting over. But as the months passed, he realized that he didn't want to spend the rest of his life alone. He deserved happiness, just as much as his children did. It was at a company event that Elvis met Lisa. She was a colleague from another department, smart, kind, and with a warm smile that seemed to melt the ice around his heart. They started talking, first casually, then more frequently. They went from discussing work to sharing stories about their lives. Lisa was a single mother, and she understood the struggles Elvis had been through. There was no need to explain the pain of betrayal. She had lived through her own share of hardships. One night, after a particularly long conversation over dinner, Elvis realized that he was falling for her. The thought scared him at first, opening up again after everything that had happened. But Lisa made it easy. She was patient, understanding, and, most importantly, she cared for him and his children genuinely. When Elvis finally introduced Lisa to Jake and Rose, he was nervous. He had no idea how they would react. But to his relief, they took to her almost immediately. Lisa wasn't trying to replace their mother. She simply wanted to be there for them. She listened to Rose's stories, helped Jake with his homework, and soon, her presence brought a warmth back into the house that had been missing for so long. The transformation in the household was palpable. Laughter began to fill the rooms again, and the tension that had once been constant started to dissipate. Elvis couldn't help but feel that things were finally moving in the right direction. But he knew his plan wasn't complete yet. The final piece was making sure that Maria realized exactly what she had lost. As Greg's empire continued to collapse, Maria's world fell apart with it. Elvis heard through mutual acquaintances that she had begun to panic. The luxury life she had traded her family for was slipping through her fingers, and she had nowhere to turn. Greg had become distant, their relationship strained by the mounting pressure of their failing finances. It wasn't long before Elvis received the news he had been waiting for. Greg had left her. Alone, broke, and with nowhere to go, Maria had finally hit rock bottom. But Elvis wasn't done yet. He made sure that word got back to her about his success, about the life he had built without her. He wanted her to know that he and the kids were thriving, that they had moved on, and that she was the one who had been left behind. One day, as Elvis was sitting in his office, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was Maria, asking to meet. Elvis stared at the message for a long time before replying. He agreed to meet her, but he already knew how it would end. When they finally met, Elvis could barely recognize her. The confident, glamorous woman who had walked out on him months ago was gone. In her place was someone who looked tired, desperate. She tried to apologize, to explain herself, but Elvis didn't need to hear it. He had already moved on. "I'm not here to talk about the past," Elvis said, cutting her off. "I'm here to tell you that it's over. I've rebuilt my life, and I've found someone who truly cares about me and the kids. You made your choice, Maria, and now you have to live with it." As he walked away from that meeting, Elvis felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He had done what he needed to do, not just for himself, but for his children. They had been through hell, but they had come out stronger on the other side. And now, they could finally put the past behind them and look forward to a brighter future. As Elvis's life blossomed with newfound happiness and success, Maria's world rapidly deteriorated. The man she had left her family for, Greg, had become a stranger, distant, resentful, and increasingly hostile as his business empire crumbled around him. The luxury SUV that once symbolized her upgraded life was repossessed. The expensive clothes she once flaunted were now reminders of a fading dream. Every day, she felt the grip of reality tightening around her, squeezing the life out of the illusion she had chased. It started with the little things. Dinners that were once at the city's finest restaurants became takeout from the cheapest places they could find. The weekend getaways turned into long nights at home, where Greg would drink silently, staring at the television without saying a word to her. Then, the creditors started calling. Greg would answer the phone, his face contorting with anger, shouting about deals gone wrong and investors pulling out. Maria would retreat to the bedroom, clutching a pillow, hoping that this nightmare would end. But it only got worse. One evening, the tension finally snapped. Greg stormed into their apartment, his face twisted with fury. "This is all your fault," he shouted, throwing his jacket onto the floor. "Ever since you came into my life, everything's gone to shit. I should have never left everything for you." Maria, who had been sitting on the couch, looked up in shock. "What are you talking about, Greg? We're in this together, aren't we?" "Together?" Greg sneered, his eyes narrowing with contempt. "You were just a fun distraction, a toy. But now? Now you're nothing but bad luck. Everything I touch turns to dust, and it's because of you." His voice rose with every word, and Maria felt the sting of his accusation like a slap across the face. "Greg, please," she pleaded, standing up to face him. "We can work through this. We can—" "No, bitch, shut up," he cut her off, shaking his head. "I'm done. I'm done with you and this mess. I found someone else, someone younger, someone who doesn't bring disaster wherever she goes. I'm leaving, Maria. You're on your own." With that, Greg turned on his heel and began packing his things. Maria stood frozen, her mind racing to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. He couldn't be leaving her, not after everything she had given up. But as she watched him throw his belongings into a suitcase, the reality sank in. The man she had abandoned her family for, the man who had promised her a life of luxury and happiness, was walking out the door without a second thought. "Greg, please don't do this," Maria begged, tears streaming down her face. "I have nowhere else to go. Please." But Greg ignored her, zipping up his suitcase and heading for the door. "You'll figure something out," he muttered, not even bothering to look at her as he walked out. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving Maria alone in the now emptied apartment. The silence that followed was deafening. She collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, realizing that she had lost everything. In the days that followed, Maria's life spiraled further into despair. She tried to reach out to friends, but no one answered her calls. She had burned too many bridges, and now she was paying the price. The apartment, once a symbol of her new life, now felt like a prison. The walls seemed to close in on her, suffocating her with the weight of her mistakes. Desperate and with nowhere else to turn, Maria made a decision that she had once thought impossible. She would go back to Elvis, to the family she had abandoned. Surely, they would take her back. She was their mother after all. They couldn't turn her away. She would apologize, beg for forgiveness, and maybe, just maybe, she could reclaim some of the life she had thrown away. With trembling hands, Maria knocked on the door of the house she had once called home. The sound echoed in the quiet suburban neighborhood, each knock a reminder of what she had lost. After what felt like an eternity, the door opened. But it wasn't Elvis who stood there. It was a woman with a warm smile and kind eyes, who looked at Maria with a mixture of curiosity and pity. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, her voice gentle. Maria's heart sank. She knew who this woman was, Elvis's new partner, the woman who had taken her place. "I need to speak to Elvis," Maria stammered, her voice cracking. "Please, it's important." The woman hesitated for a moment before stepping aside. "Come in," she said, her tone still kind. Maria entered the house, her eyes darting around. The living room was filled with photos of Elvis, the kids, and this woman. They looked happy, content, a stark contrast to the life Maria had been living. It was like stepping into a life that had moved on without her. Elvis appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable as he took in the sight of Maria standing in his home. "What do you want, Maria?" he asked, his voice cold and distant. Tears welled up in Maria's eyes as she fell to her knees. "I made a mistake, Elvis. Please forgive me. Let me come back. I miss you and the kids. I was wrong." Elvis stared at her, his face hardening as he remembered the pain she had caused. He thought about the nights he had stayed up comforting Rose, the anger he had seen in Jake's eyes, the way Maria had laughed at him as she walked out the door. "You made your choice, Maria," he said, his voice like steel. "You wanted a life without us, and now you have it. You're not welcome here anymore." Maria's sobs filled the room, but Elvis's heart had hardened. He had moved on, rebuilt his life without her, and he wasn't about to let her back in. Lisa stepped forward, her hand resting gently on Maria's shoulder. "It's time to go," she said softly. Maria looked up, her vision blurred with tears. She saw the life she had once taken for granted, the warmth, the love, the stability, and knew that it was gone forever. As she was gently escorted out of the house, the door closed behind her with a finality that echoed in her soul. Standing on the porch, Maria realized that she had lost everything: her family, her home, and the man who had once loved her. The life she had destroyed for a fleeting fantasy was now nothing more than a memory, and she was left with nothing but regret. 12 years had passed, and the life Elvis once knew had been completely transformed. The house that once echoed with the pain of betrayal now buzzed with laughter, love, and the hum of a family that had risen from the ashes. Elvis had become a successful and respected figure in his industry, a man who had rebuilt his life brick by brick, and his children, Jake and Rose, had grown into extraordinary young adults. Jake, once a teenager consumed by anger and confusion, had channeled that energy into building his own business empire. At 27, he was already a successful entrepreneur, known for his innovative ideas and relentless drive. His recent wedding had been a celebration of love, resilience, and new beginnings, attended by friends and family who had witnessed his incredible journey. Rose, who had been just a little girl when her mother walked out, was now a confident and driven young woman. She was excelling in college, on her way to becoming a doctor, a dream she had nurtured for years. Her determination and compassion were evident in everything she did, traits she had inherited from her father, who had been her rock through the darkest times. The scars of Maria's betrayal, though still there, had long since healed. They served as a reminder of the strength they had found in each other and the life they had built together. The toxic presence of the past had no place in the home they had created, a home filled with warmth, support, and unconditional love. One evening, Elvis and Lisa, along with Jake, Rose, and their closest friends, attended a charity event in the city. The ballroom was elegant. It was an event celebrating community leaders and philanthropists, and Elvis, now a pillar of his community, was one of the honorees. As they moved through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries and catching up with old friends, Elvis felt a sense of pride, not just in his professional achievements, but in the family he had nurtured and the life they had all worked so hard to create. Lisa, a woman who had brought so much love and stability into their lives, held his hand, their fingers intertwined, a silent testament to the bond they shared. But then, across the room, Elvis's eyes caught sight of a figure he had not expected to see. It was Maria. She stood alone, looking gaunt and tired. Her once vibrant beauty now faded by years of hardship and regret. Her clothes were worn, her hair lacked the shine it once had, and the confident air she had once carried was gone. She looked like a shadow of the woman she had been, and it was clear that life had not been kind to her. Maria's eyes locked onto Elvis's, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to pause. She took a tentative step forward, her gaze pleading, as if hoping to find some semblance of the life she had lost. But Elvis's expression remained unreadable, a wall of calm detachment. He felt no anger, no sadness, only indifference. As Maria slowly approached, Elvis turned his attention back to his family. He gently guided Lisa and children toward a group of friends, deliberately steering them away from the path Maria was taking. His movements were subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone but Maria, who stood frozen, watching as the people she once called her family moved further and further away from her. The group found themselves at a table with old friends, and soon the air was filled with laughter and the warmth of shared memories. Elvis and Lisa were caught up in a conversation about their upcoming vacation plans, while Jake and Rose discussed their latest ventures with the group, their faces glowing with excitement and pride. It was a moment of pure contentment, a moment that Maria, standing on the sidelines, could only observe from afar. Maria's eyes filled with tears as she watched them. The joy on their faces, the love they shared. It was all so painfully familiar, yet completely out of reach. She had made her choice all those years ago, and now, the consequences of that choice were laid bare before her. The family she had once taken for granted had moved on, grown stronger, and found happiness without her. And she, in her desperate search for a better life, had ended up with nothing. The tears began to fall freely, and Maria quickly turned away, not wanting anyone to see her in such a vulnerable state. She moved to the edge of the room, away from the laughter and the light, where she could wallow in her regrets in peace. She stood by a large window, staring out into the night, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. The city lights sparkled in the distance, a stark contrast to the darkness that had enveloped her life. For Elvis, the night continued without interruption. He was fully present with his family and friends, the memories of the past relegated to a distant corner of his mind. He no longer felt the need to look back. His life had become a testament to resilience, a life rebuilt with love and care, surrounded by people who truly mattered. As the evening drew to a close, the group decided to leave the event together, stepping out into the cool night air. They walked toward their cars, still chatting and laughing, the night a success in more ways than one. Elvis, holding Lisa's hand, felt a deep sense of peace. The pain of the past was finally behind him, and the future was bright. Maria watched them from a distance, standing in the shadows as they left. She was alone, forgotten by the people she had once abandoned, left to face the harsh reality of the life she had chosen. The life she had destroyed for a fleeting fantasy was now nothing more than a memory, a painful reminder of what could have been. As Elvis and his family drove away, the world moved on without Maria, leaving her in the silence of her regrets. She had lost everything, her family, her home, and the man who had once loved her. And now, she had nothing but the cold embrace of loneliness to keep her company.